My wife secretly married her childhood friend, then forged my signature to claim my $500, $0 inheritance and property. Now she's trying to disappear with everything after I found out. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd be the kind of guy to get like this, but here I am, staring at my own life falling apart. It all started with a simple suspicion. Something just didn't sit right anymore. You know how it is. Little things pile up and suddenly you're questioning everything. My wife, Lisa, had always been a bit of a drama queen, but I loved her. We'd been married for 6 years, and for the most part, I thought we had a good life. She was beautiful, ambitious, and she always knew how to make me laugh. But over the past few months, I'd noticed her acting different, more distant, secretive even. She started coming home late from work meetings, which I initially brushed off. She'd say she was working late or meeting some new friends from her book club, but I'd catch her texting someone at odd hours, hiding her phone when I walked into the room. Still, I wanted to believe she was just stressed or maybe having some kind of midlife crisis. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. Besides, I was busy with my own job, running a small but successful real estate firm, and I was trying to keep everything afloat. But then one night I found her phone on the kitchen table, unlocked. I don't usually snoop, but something made me pick it up. I scrolled through her messages and saw a conversation that stopped me cold. It was with a guy named Mark. They were talking about meeting up later, and there was talk about secrets and us against the world. My stomach clenched. I looked at the timestamps. This wasn't just a casual chat, it was ongoing. My mind raced. Who was Mark? Why was Lisa hiding this? And more importantly, was this just an emotional thing or was there more? The next day, I started noticing more signs. Her phone kept ringing at odd hours. She'd get defensive if I asked about her whereabouts, and her excuses about work friends didn't add up anymore. Then I caught her in a lie about where she was the night before. She said she was at a spa with her friends, but I found a receipt showing she was at a hotel with Mark. That was the moment I knew I had to confront her. But I didn't just confront her then. I needed to be sure. I started digging deeper, checking her emails, bank statements, and social media. What I uncovered shook me to my core. Lisa wasn't just cheating on me, she was planning something much bigger. I found messages indicating she was involved with Mark in ways I never imagined. She'd even introduced him to her friends as her secret boyfriend. And the worst part, she'd been secretly married to him for almost a year. You see, Lisa had this side of her that was manipulative, bitchy even. She'd lie through her teeth, spin stories, and act innocent when caught. She'd tell me I was paranoid, that I didn't trust her, that I was overreacting. But I wasn't stupid. I knew something was wrong, and now I had proof. The betrayal ran deeper than I thought, and it wasn't just about the affair. It was about the lies, the deception, and the way she'd been living a double life behind my back. What made it worse was the financial angle. I found out she'd been secretly forging my signature on documents to claim my inheritance, $500,000, and transfer property into her name. She was planning to disappear with everything, I'm sure of it. The inheritance was supposed to be ours, but she'd been scheming to take it all and leave me with nothing. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. All those years, all that trust, and it was all a lie. I didn't sleep that night. I sat there staring at the phone that had given me all the answers. Every emotion hit me: anger, sadness, betrayal, and a deep, burning sense of loss. How could she do this? How could she lie, cheat, and then try to take everything I worked for? That's when I knew I had to act. I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. So I started planning my next move. I needed proof, I needed a plan, and most of all, I needed to figure out how to protect what was mine. I wasn't going to let her walk away with my money, my property, or my dignity. This was just the beginning of a very long, very complicated game. The more I looked into her mess, the more I realized how deep her deception went. The documents she forged, the signatures she faked, she'd been planning this for months. I found email chains between her and a lawyer discussing how to transfer our assets without me catching on. She'd even hired a private investigator to cover her tracks, making sure no one would find out what she was up to. I couldn't believe how naive I'd been. I'd always suspected she was hiding something, sure, but I never thought she'd go this far. The betrayal wasn't just about the affair or the money. It was about the fact that she'd lied to me every step of the way. It felt like I was living in some twisted nightmare. I had to confront her, but I knew I had to be smart about it. One evening, I invited her to sit down in the living room. She looked annoyed, like I was bothering her. I could see the flicker of guilt in her eyes, but she quickly masked it with her usual bitchy attitude. I told her I knew everything about Mark, the secret marriage, the forged signatures, the plans to run away with all my money. She scoffed, acting like I was crazy, saying I was paranoid, that I was imagining things. But I had enough proof to drown her in lies. Her reaction was classic Lisa. She started crying, claiming she was under so much stress, that she loved me, and that Mark was just a mistake. She swore she'd never do anything to hurt me, that it was all a misunderstanding. She even went as far as to say that I was the one cheating, that I'd been distant and suspicious for months. It was pure nonsense. I saw through her. I knew she was lying, but I played along, trying to keep her talking. I wanted her to slip up, to say something I could use against her. While she was rambling, I secretly recorded her. I didn't trust her word anymore. I knew I needed concrete evidence if I was going to do something about this. When she finally ran out of breath, I told her I needed some time to think. I told her I was going to check the bank accounts myself and see where the money was going. That was the moment I realized I had to act fast. She was clearly trying to cover her tracks even more now that I was onto her. That night, I stayed up digging into her email account, her bank statements, and her phone. What I found was even worse than I expected. She transferred a large chunk of the inheritance into a secret account in her name. She'd also been secretly meeting with Mark, planning their escape. I saw receipts for hotel stays, private dinners, and even a new condo they'd bought together. All this without my knowledge. I felt a mix of rage and despair. How could she do this to me? To everything we built? I knew I had to do something drastic. I couldn't let her just walk away with my money and my life. I started thinking about how to get the evidence I needed to take legal action. I contacted a lawyer I knew, someone discreet, who could help me get a court order to freeze her accounts and investigate her financial activities. The idea was to catch her red-handed before she could disappear with everything. Meanwhile, I kept my cool around her. I didn't want her to suspect I was onto her completely. I played the nice husband, pretending everything was normal, while secretly gathering everything I needed. I even started documenting everything: screenshots, copies of emails, bank statements. It was like building a case against her, and I knew I had to be meticulous. The most shocking part: as I was digging, I found out she'd been telling her friends she was getting a divorce, that I was crazy and paranoid, and that she was planning to start fresh somewhere else with Mark. She'd been lying to everyone, spinning her web of deceit. I couldn't believe how far she'd gone. It was like she'd turned into a completely different person, cold, manipulative, and ruthless. Every time I thought about her lies, my stomach churned. How could she have done this to me? I had invested 6 years of my life in her, and she'd been secretly planning her escape all along. I was angry, but at the same time, I felt betrayed on a level I never thought possible. I wondered how I'd let this happen, how I'd been so blind. But I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it, not without a fight. I had to protect what was mine: inheritance, my property, my dignity. I couldn't let her erase everything we'd built. The next step was clear. I had to confront her again with everything I'd found, and I had to prepare for the worst. Because if she was planning to disappear, I wasn't going to let her do it without a fight. The confrontation I'd been dreading finally came sooner than I expected. I sat her down in the living room, my hands trembling slightly, trying to keep my voice steady. I laid out all the evidence I'd gathered: the emails, the bank statements, the forged signatures. I played the recordings I'd made of her lying to me, and I could see her face drain of color. At first, everything. She looked me straight in the eyes with that bitchy smirk and told me I was crazy, said I was imagining things, that I was paranoid. She even had the nerve to accuse me of cheating, claiming I was the one sneaking around and hiding things. I was furious. I told her I wasn't stupid, that I knew she'd been planning this for months. I told her I had proof she'd been married to Mark, that she'd forged my signature to claim my inheritance, and that I knew about the property she was trying to run away with. Her reaction was to get defensive, then angry. She started yelling, calling me all sorts of names: jealous, insecure, controlling. She said I had no right to accuse her of anything, that I'd ruined her life with my suspicions. But I wasn't about to let her manipulate her way out of this. I told her I was done playing her game, that I was calling the lawyer first thing in the morning to freeze her accounts and get an official investigation started. She stormed out of the room, screaming that I was ruining her life, that she loved me, and that I was just a jealous husband who couldn't handle her success and independence. That's when it hit me. She was trying to turn the tables, making me out to be the bad guy. But I knew better. I'd seen too much. The truth was in the evidence, and I wasn't going to let her lie her way out of this one. The next few days were a whirlwind. I contacted a lawyer I trust, someone who specializes in financial crimes and divorce cases. We immediately filed a court order to freeze her bank accounts and investigate her financial activities. I also hired a private investigator to keep tabs on her, just in case she tried to make a run for it. I knew she was planning something, probably to disappear with my inheritance, my property, and whatever else she could get her hands on. While all this was happening, I kept up the act of being the perfect husband, playing the part she expected. I didn't want her to suspect that I was onto her completely. I had to keep her complacent so I could gather everything I needed. I also started documenting every interaction, every lie, every move she made from that point on. I knew I was building a case, and I had to be meticulous. One evening she came home late again, looking nervous. She tried to act normal, but I could see the flicker of guilt behind her eyes. I decided to push her a little, just enough to see if she'd slip up. I asked her about her plans, her future, and whether she'd been talking to Mark lately. Everything, but I could tell she was lying. There was a nervous energy about her, fidgeting, avoiding eye contact, trying to change the subject. That's when I finally told her I knew about her secret marriage. Her face twisted into a mixture of anger and fear. She argued, yelled, begged me not to ruin everything. She said she loved me, that she was just desperate and made a mistake. But I didn't believe her anymore. I told her I was done being played for a fool. If she thought she could lie her way out of this, she was dead wrong. The worst part, as she was trying to plead her case, I realized how much she'd been manipulating me. She'd lied so much, played the victim, tried to turn my own suspicions against me. It made me sick. I felt like I'd been living in a nightmare for months, and now I was finally waking up to how deep her lies went. The next step was legal. I had already started the process of getting everything in order: court hearings, forensic investigations, and asset recovery. I knew I was about to lose a lot: my inheritance, my property, my peace of mind. But I also knew I couldn't let her walk away with everything. Not after everything she'd done. I kept asking myself how I could miss the signs, how I'd been so blind. But at the same time, I was angry. Angry at her, furious at myself for trusting her so blindly. And I was determined to fight for what was mine. I wasn't going down without a serious battle. I knew that much. And as much as it hurt, I also knew I'd never let her do this to me again. The legal process moved quickly once I got the lawyer involved. We filed for an emergency court order to freeze all her accounts and assets, and I made sure to gather every piece of evidence I had: screenshots, emails, chat logs, bank statements. I wanted to make sure there was no way she could slip away with everything before the court could intervene. In the meantime, I kept up the facade of being the supportive, loving husband, at least outwardly. Inside, I was boiling with rage, but I knew I had to stay calm and collected. If she sensed I was onto her, she might try to destroy evidence or run even faster. I didn't trust her anymore. She'd proven she'd lie and manipulate to get what she wanted. One night, she came home looking even more nervous than usual. Her eyes darted around as she entered the house, like she was expecting someone to be waiting for her. I played it cool, acting like everything was fine. But inside, I was calculating my next move. I decided to confront her again, but this time with more directness. I told her I knew about her secret marriage to Mark, that I had uncovered everything. Her face froze for a second, then she started crying, big fake tears that didn't reach her eyes. She told me she was sorry, that she'd made a terrible mistake, and begged for my forgiveness. She said she loved me, that Mark was just a fling, and that she never meant to hurt me. I looked her straight in the eyes and told her that her lies had gone too far, that I wasn't going to let her destroy my life. I reminded her of the forged signatures, the transfers of my inheritance, and her plans to disappear with my property. I told her I had already started legal proceedings and that I'd make sure she paid for what she'd done. She tried to spin it to make me feel guilty, saying she was desperate, that she'd been under so much stress. She said she'd do anything to make it right, even if it meant losing Mark. But I wasn't buying it. I knew her game. She was trying to manipulate me again, to turn my anger into guilt so I'd back off. But I was done with her lies. The next morning, I called the lawyer and checked on the court's progress. They'd already issued the order to freeze her accounts, and the investigation was moving forward. I felt a small sense of relief knowing I'd protected most of what was mine. But I also knew the hardest part was still ahead, getting her to face the consequences and stop her from running away with everything. That day, I decided to confront her one last time, not just with words but with a plan. I told her I was going to take back control of my life, that I would fight her for my inheritance, my property, and my dignity. I told her I wasn't going to let her destroy everything I'd worked so hard for. She looked at me with a mixture of fury and despair, realizing I wasn't backing down. I could see her trying to come up with another lie, another way out, but I was done listening. I told her that I knew she'd been planning this for months, that I had all the evidence I needed to take her to court and strip her of everything she'd stolen. I warned her that if she tried to run, I'd find her, no matter where she went. The truth is, I felt a strange mix of relief and heartbreak. Relief because I was finally taking control, and heartbreak because I had to face the fact that the woman I loved had betrayed me so completely. I'd spent years building our life, only to find out it was built on lies. I realized that my trust had been shattered, and I'd have to rebuild from scratch if I ever could, but I also knew I'd be okay. I had to be. I'd never let her take everything I worked for, and I'd make damn sure she paid for what she'd done. I was more determined than ever to fight for what was mine, no matter how long it took. Because at this point, I wasn't just fighting for my money or my property. I was fighting for my dignity, my sanity, my future. The days that followed were a blur of court appointments, investigators, and endless paperwork. The court finally issued an order to freeze all her bank accounts and assets, and I watched as her face went pale when she realized she couldn't access any of her new money or property. It was a small victory, but I knew she'd try to find a way around it. She was cunning, after all. Meanwhile, I kept gathering evidence, making sure every detail was documented. I had the recordings of her lies, the forged signatures, the transfer documents, and the receipts from her secret meetings with Mark. I even hired a private investigator to follow her. Sometimes she'd meet Mark at a fancy restaurant. Sometimes she'd disappear for hours. I wanted to know exactly where she was, what she was doing, and how far she was willing to go to run away with my life. One night she came home more agitated than ever. Her eyes darted around and she was packing around the house like a caged animal. I played it cool, sitting on the couch, pretending to be relaxed. Then she snapped at me, accusing me of spying on her, of invading her privacy. She yelled that I was controlling, that I didn't trust her, and that I was ruining everything. I looked her straight in the eyes and said, "Lisa, I have all the evidence I need. You've been lying to me for months. You married Mark secretly, forged my signature, and planned to disappear with my inheritance. I won't let you do that, not without consequences." Her face twisted into a snarl. She yelled back that I was a jealous, insecure asshole who didn't understand her, that she was just trying to find happiness, a word she kept repeating like a mantra. I knew she was trying to manipulate me again, to make me doubt myself, But I was beyond falling for her games. I'd seen too much. The next day, I sat her down and laid out the facts again, this time more forcefully. I told her that I was going to take her to court, that I'd seek full custody of our assets, and that I'd expose everything she'd done. I warned her that if she tried to run away or hide, I'd find her and make her pay. I told her she'd lost my trust forever and that I was done being her victim. Her reaction was to cry, but it was fake tears. She knew she'd been cornered. She begged me to forgive her, to give her one last chance. She said she'd do anything to make it right, but I wasn't buying it anymore. I told her I wasn't interested in her apologies or her lies. I was done being played. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about everything she'd done, how she'd manipulated me, lied to everyone, and tried to steal my future. It hurt, a lot, but I also felt a strange sense of relief. I was finally fighting back, taking control of my life. I wasn't going to let her ruin me. The legal battle was just beginning, and I knew it would take months, maybe longer, to get her completely out of my life, but I was prepared. I was ready to see this through no matter what it took. I had to protect what was mine, and I couldn't let her get away with it. Not anymore. Looking back, I realized how much trust I'd given her, trust I thought was unbreakable. Now I see how fragile it was, how easily it was shattered by lies and greed. I learned that sometimes the people closest to you can betray you the most. And the only way to survive is to stand up and fight for yourself, even when it feels like the world is crumbling around you. Because in the end, you have to be your own protector. That's what I'm doing now, rebuilding my life piece by piece, after everything she tried to steal from me. The court proceedings dragged on longer than I expected, but in the end, justice caught up with her. The judge ordered her to return all the stolen assets, and the court also awarded me full custody of the property and the inheritance. She was furious, of course, screaming and crying in court, trying to spin her lies one last time, but I had everything documented, every forged signature, every lie, every secret meeting, and it was enough to prove her guilt beyond a shadow of a doubt. When the final judgment came through, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. The money was returned, the property was secured, and she was legally barred from ever taking anything else. But the damage was done. My trust was shattered, and I knew I'd never look at her the same way again. I realized I'd wasted years on a woman who was willing to destroy everything we built for her own selfish gain. After she left, I spent some time alone, reflecting on what had happened. I'd been naive, trusting someone who had been secretly planning her escape for months. But I also learned an important lesson. Never ignore the warning signs. Never assume the best of someone just because you love them. People can surprise you in the worst ways. I've started rebuilding my life from scratch. I've moved into a new place, cut all ties with her friends, and focused on my work and my own healing. It hasn't been easy. Trust doesn't come back overnight, and the pain of betrayal lingers. But I've also learned that I'm stronger than I thought. I have a new perspective now, one that values honesty, loyalty, and respect above all else. Looking back, I wish I'd been more cautious, more attentive. But I also know that sometimes life throws these brutal lessons at you so you can grow. I want others to know, if something feels off, don't ignore it. Trust your instincts and don't be afraid to dig deeper. Because when you find out someone you love has been lying, cheating, and planning to steal from you, the only way forward is to stand your ground and fight for what's rightfully yours. Now, I'm focusing on moving forward, rebuilding my confidence, and making sure I never let anyone hurt me like that again. I may have lost a lot, but I gained clarity. I learned that the most valuable thing you can do is protect yourself, and never let anyone take that away from you, no matter how much you love them or how hard it hurts. Because in the end, your own integrity and peace are worth more than any inheritance, property, or fleeting relationship.